Hey guys, Eternize here. Today we're going to take a look at how you can make an infinite amount of Techno Rumble variations. And after you've watched this video, you can implement the techniques to make Techno Rumble out of virtually any sample. Let's get into it. Alright, first I'm going to briefly explain the setup. Obviously we're going to focus on the kick tail, but just for transparency, I'm going to quickly show you the punch as well. The punch is an early club kick. And for a bit of fill, the second sound is a duplicate of the first one, only with the higher frequencies. Those two sounds are then routed to the same bus, and here I've added a bit of distortion to start getting into that hard techno type of character. This is the bus that the tail is going to be going into as well, so keep in mind that outside of the individual channels that are going to make up the tail, it's going to come into this bus channel and pick up more distortion as well. Alright, that's the punch part. Let's get into the tail. So I promised you can make a tail out of anything, right? So let's begin with Whitenoise. What we have here is an untreated stream of Whitenoise sampled directly from Silent 1. So it's just neutral and flat Whitenoise. Whitenoise is actually easy to work with because it already has a lot of low end to begin with. But to start making the Techno Rumble, step number one is always to isolate the low end. So to do that, we take an EQ and we high cut and low cut until we're left with this part around the low end rumble. In this case, the cuts are made around 35 and 156 Hz. This is going to vary depending on what sound you use to make the tail. So this is one of those steps where you usually would go back and adjust once you get the sound going. Alright, next step, we want to start distorting. I'm using Logic's Bit Crusher, but really this is just a clean clip distortion. So distortion going into a hard clip. You can use any distortion here, but I find cleaner distortion to work the best. Okay, now we have a lot of rumble going on. So now we want to start shaping it into the tail that we're going to use for the kick. And this of course depends on how long your punch is. So with a longer punch, you usually want your tail to begin later, and the opposite with a shorter punch. In our case, the punch is taken up about half of the length of the kick. So in this case, we want to have the tail coming in about halfway. So I'm doing this by using a volume shaper, but obviously you can do this by hand with volume automation as well. Alright, so now we have the punch for the first half of the kick and then our tail for the second half. And when we put it together, it sounds like this. We have a pretty sweet hard techno kick. Now, the beauty of using samples like Whitenoise is that we can now move the sample into different positions and we'll get all sorts of variations out of that single sample. You can even pitch it up and down and that will have the same effect. Every time you reposition or mangle the sample, it will give you a slightly different variation, which is really cool. Alright, what if we did the same thing with a very different sample? Maybe a sample that didn't even have any low end in it to begin with. How about this snare sample? Clearly we can't make a proper sounding techno tail out of that, right? Well, let's put it to the test. Once again, first we isolate the low end. Then we add distortion. Then we shape the tail to fit the punch. And in this case, we did some minor mixing corrections as well. So by now you can see that the technique of isolating the low end, distorting and volume shaping can make pretty much any sample a really good sounding techno rumble tail. But what if we wanted to take that a step even further? Well, let me show you one more technique. Once again, let's choose a sample that makes no sense whatsoever to use for a techno kick tail. For this example, I've chosen a clap sample. Yes, a clap sample. Now let's apply the technique we know. We start off by isolating the low end. Then we add distortion. Now this is where we're going to do it a little different. Now we are going to add a reverb right before the distortion. The settings you want are usually a decay on the lower side and also the mix set to a very low setting. Also the character is set all the way to clean, which means there is no chorus effect or modulation added to the signal. I'm going to explain the beauty about adding the reverb in just a second, but first let's finish the chain. Here's the tail with the reverb added. Again, in the end, we shape the tail with a volume shaper and do the final mixing. Now, just as with the first two examples, we can do what we can do with a sample to get more variations. We can change the position and we can change the pitch and so on. But the reverb puts a layer on top of that and gives us even more options. You see, every time we change the setting of the reverb just a little bit, we get a new variation of the tail. So changing the decay, the stereo width, the mix, and even the pre-delay will give you a different sound. So really, this is just endless variations. And the fact that you have access to all of these different variations with just a few knobs on a reverb, that's kind of crazy. All right, let's listen to the different variations we got. Alright guys, that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.